All right, you guys, let's talk about something no one really prepares you for in the new year, right? It's the beginning of the new year, and you might feel like you missed the goal setting boat. Everyone says this is when you're supposed to feel motivated, you're supposed to have clear goals, fresh energy, big vision. But what if you don't? What if instead of excitement, you feel tired or quiet? Or just unsure? If that's you, I want you to hear this clearly right from the start. There is nothing wrong with you. A lack of motivation isn't always a problem to fix. Sometimes it's information, right? I talk a lot about contrast equaling clarity. So when you get those emotions that feel like I'm just tired or I'm quiet or I'm unsure or I'm lacking motivation, and you start thinking things like, what is wrong with me? I want you to instead go, contrast equals clarity. This is just information. What do I need to pay attention to, right? And today, I want to walk you through 3 reasons you might not feel motivated right now and why none of them means you're failing or falling behind. All right, let's dig in. Reason number 1, you've actually already accomplished more than you've acknowledged yourself for. You guys, this is big, and it's something we don't talk about enough. But first of all, motivation often drops after growth, not failure. I'll say it again. Motivation often drops off after growth, not after failure, right? We think we failed, so I don't have motivation. But really, we've grown, and so the motivation goes away. Now, I know what you must be thinking. I didn't grow last year. I didn't grow enough. My business didn't quadruple and all of these things, and you're not where you want to be. But so often, we are attributing growth to business metrics, and we're not attributing growth to personal growth. So let me ask you a question. If you pushed hard last year, mentally, emotionally, professionally, your system may simply be catching up, right? We tend to run from one goal straight into the other without ever stopping to acknowledge who we became in the process. And when that happens, motivation fails, not because you're done, not because you are, something's wrong with you, like I said, but because you haven't integrated the growth yet. Ed Milet, who I adore, talks a lot about this. He talks about it as an identity lag when your results have changed faster than your self-image. Now, again, I hear what you're saying. You're saying, but I didn't grow. My business didn't double. I didn't hit 7 figures. I'm here yet again trying to push to that goal. But I'm telling you, you might be in a season of recalibration. So before asking yourself, what is my next big goal? Ask yourself instead, who did last year require me to become? Because clarity will come from recognition, not pressure. Clarity comes from recognition, not pressure. Look back on the year. So I'm going to give you a task, an exercise, because I love putting, concepts into action. And this is something I do every single year, y'all. I've done it for 12, 13 years running. I did it just a couple weeks ago on the plane ride to the British Virgin Islands. I go back in my camera roll. I just pick up my phone. I start at January 1 and I go all the way through to December 31st. And I ask myself, what are the big moments? What are the top 10 moments, right? They might be huge accomplishments, big accolades, but they also might be transitions. For me, one of the first ones of last year was my mom passing away. Y'all, don't you think that was massive growth for me, massive identity shift? I personally don't think, having lost both of my parents, that there is more of an identity shift that happens in our lifetime, in our whole lifespan, as to what happens when we lose a parent. I've been one thing since the day I was born. I was daddy's little girl, and I was my mom's little one, right? I was my mom's daughter and my father's daughter. And yes, I know I still am. but really, they're not here on this earth anymore. That is a big, huge shift. And it might take me a moment to recalibrate. It might take me a moment for my identity to catch up with that shift, right? Clarity for what's next comes from recognition, not pressure. So please take the 15 minutes it will take you to start at January 1st in your camera roll and go back and write down what were the top 10. I can guarantee you 7 to 8 of them you forgot about. You are not giving it the pause that it deserves. And it's so life-giving and it's so fun. So do that for me. All right. Reason number 2, you might be in a season of rest or preparation. Not every season is a building season. We live in a culture that glorifies constant momentum, but I'm here to tell you that high performers don't win because they push nonstop. They win because they respect cycles. And the higher the peak, the longer the recovery. I remember being with Brendan Burchard one weekend and we were chatting and he gave me the permission I needed, right? I recognized that when I had hit kind of the peak of my past company, which was number 1 in a company out of hundreds of thousands, so accomplishment that I chased after for 6 years. It was the tippy top of the mountaintop. You don't get any higher than that. And he said, Moira, gosh, you're so hard on yourself. Do you understand that the higher the peak, the longer the recovery? And he said, it's going to take you a while. It's going to take you a while just to recalibrate, just to recover from the climb. I mean, think about a physical climb. If you were climbing to the top of Mount Everest, don't you think you need a longer recovery? You don't think you go to the next mountain the next day, right? If you've been climbing and stretching and carrying a lot, your lack of motivation might be your body and mind asking for space. It's not failure. High performers depend on energy management. Gosh, this is something that I am so passionate about, right? You don't gain clarity when you're exhausted. You don't feel inspired when you're depleted. Rest isn't quitting. It is listening. Rest isn't quitting. It's tuning in. So instead of forcing motivation, ask yourself, what is this season asking of me right now? What is it asking of me right now? Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is pause long enough to hear what's next. All right, reason number 3. And this is one that you might have thought was in the list. Your why isn't deep enough. Now, I say deep, and I want to clarify that. I want to say it's either not deep enough or just personal enough. And this isn't about judging somebody's why. It's just about getting really honest with yourself. So for the most part, surface goals don't generate lasting motivation, right? So if it's only about the outcome, if it's only about becoming number 1, if it's only about income, you're not going to fight very hard when things get uncomfortable, right? And so we want our goal to be deep enough, but we also want our goal to be personal enough. So let me tell you this little story I've shared in so many trainings. So when I first started to dig into this work about finding your why, Simon Sinek has a great TED Talk called It's All About Why or Finding Your Why, something like that. Just look up Simon Sinek. It's amazing. Well, the girl that was leading the training that I was in over a decade ago talked about her why to build her business, to build her income, was to bring her husband home from the military. That he was overseas, that he wasn't with his family, he wasn't seeing his children growing up. And she was terrified of the possibility of getting a phone call one day that he was never going to come home. And she told this story through tears. And I sat on the other side of the screen in tears. And I really connected the dots to a deep why, right? And I understood, gosh, you've got that kind of why, you'll push through anything to make it happen. But here was the problem. I didn't have a husband in the military. I didn't have a husband in that situation. I didn't have this deep why that brought me to tears. So I had to do some digging. And I used to always laugh when I would give these trainings because I would say, all I wanted was a pool. I just wanted a pool in my backyard. And it seemed so superficial. And to me, I said to myself, well, this isn't going to work. All I want is a pool. It's kind of comparable in my brain to saying all I want is this purse. It seemed superficial. But here was my reality. I really wanted that pool because for me, it meant community. It meant connection. It meant quality time with friends we loved. It meant all of those things that meant the world to me, right? It meant my lifestyle. It meant my evenings. It meant Friday nights and ordering pizza and sitting around and just, families raising families and community connection, all the things that matter the most, relationship. It stood for so much more. And so where on the surface it seemed superficial, it went deep. And so don't discount your why ever, right? And so in this third one, I want you to ask yourself, instead of saying, what do I want to achieve this year? Who do you want to become, right? What do you want your life to look like and feel like? And sometimes you realize what you want to achieve goes a lot deeper. And you got to tap into that to find that momentum, that motivation, that excitement. So if you take nothing else from this episode, remember this. You don't need to force excitement. You definitely don't need to shame yourself into action. It does not work. And you don't need to rush your season. Sometimes motivation doesn't show up first. Actually, it rarely does. But alignment can. Alignment shows up first. So here's a simple reflection I want to leave you with. Go back to that one exercise. Go back in your camera roll starting January 1st all the way through. Write out your top 10 moments. And then ask yourself, what's one thing you're proud of from last year? What's one thing you're ready to release from last year? And what's one quality you want to embody this year? Not a goal, but a way of being. Because maybe you're not behind. Maybe you're not unmotivated. Maybe you're right where you belong. Cut that, Caitlin. Sorry. Maybe you are right where you belong. And you're in this beautiful process of becoming. That's it for today. Man, I hope this episode really landed for you. I've been in a lot of conversations with a lot of people that are feeling this right now. And I hope that you can just take this into action and begin to feel that shift for yourself, that shift into motivation, into excitement, into tapping in to not only what you have already accomplished, but also where you're going. Thanks for joining, guys. Share this on your stories if you will. Share it with a friend. Message me. Tag me. I'd love to hear back from you guys on your takeaways. And we will see you next week.